The Lexorian broadcast came ribboning through the magnetosphere at sunrise. A crystalline voice that sounded like it was poured from a flute. "Humans," it said, "your orbit is cluttered with antiques. Please remove these exhibits before we begin serious negotiations." On my forward display, a dozen of our exhibits drifted in slow, stubborn ellipses, slab-sided frigates with rivet seams the cameras could still taste, an old battleship whose plating looked like ironed tin, a pair of corvettes that had once been museum ships on opposite sides of the Atlantic. You could still read their tourist plaques under the paint. Cuatiba, my ship, had a name that belonged to a terrestrial river and a suburban soccer club. That was our vibe, riverboats pretending to be wolves, but all the fake nostalgia hid. Real work, under the coolant scabs and hand-me-down armor. I had superconducting rails that never made it into brochures, a battery that would crack the jawbone of anyone who touched it without a prayer, and an electromagnetic throat that could sing tungsten right into God's molars. We had something else too, bolted into the keel like a secret, a legal key. "Commander Vance," said Admiral Khatri on the command net, "hold fire. Repeat, we do not initiate." Her face was wine-chiseled and still. "We wait." We'd been waiting for months. The Planetary Assembly had voted for defensive absolutism no. First strike under any provocation. The vote had been bitter, close, and very loud. Everyone knew why. If they fired first, we could show our teeth. Lexorians didn't understand teeth. They'd been a majority species on their ring world for 1,000 years. They understood cages. The Lexorian ships hung beyond GEO, pale, spindles with glowing vertebrae along their length, like someone had taken a spine and taught it to sing microwave hymns. They had no weapon ports I could see, just those vertebrae and the patient hum of capacitors. Their envoy's name was Silvroth, or that's how the transliterator rendered it. He liked to send us little videos, our ships from their angle, annotated, in polite Lexorian script with things like hydraulic recoil, adorable, or thermal bloom scraping quaint. On the bridge of Cuatiba, my XO, Toru Mika, leaned back and sipped bad coffee. "They're right, Issa," he said softly. "We are quaint. This chair creaks, like my grandfather's porch." "It creaks because you bounce nervously," I said. "Set your jaw and it'll stop." He smiled, then set his jaw, and it did. Small victories. People thought waiting was a passive verb. It wasn't. To wait inside a battleship was to move constantly, heat trouting, noise shaping, cycling the compressors until we were the coldest warm thing in orbit, checking the rails for warping, ray-lapping the bearings of flywheels that had to be coaxed like cats. It was sleeping for 5 minutes, and then hearing a spider of air squeaking through a gasket, and deciding that could not stand, tearing the panel out with your nails, and tightening the clamp by feel. Waiting was practice with a blade in your teeth. We were all blades. You don't volunteer to crew a museum ship if you want tidy floors and quiet ships. You come for the grease, and the stories, and the long chance that history might run out of patience and pick you. "Message," said Netsanit, our censor chief. "Broadband public." "Lexorians again." "Pipe it," I said, and the flute voice unrolled. "Humans," said Silvroth, "we will begin the demonstration of our resolve in 2 of your days. Clear your orbital debris to avoid misunderstandings. Your reluctance to engage in forward time is understandable. Primitive cultures often fetishize first moves. We prefer outcomes." "Outcomes," Toru repeated. "Is that a threat or a keynote?" "Both," I said. "Admiral." Admiral Khatri's window bloomed above my shoulder. "They want us to blink." She said, "We do not blink. We do not shoot. We do not give them anything to call aggression. And if their demonstration kills people," the Admiral's eyes hardened, but the rest of her face didn't move. "Then our lock opens." By lock she meant the Hecate Protocol, the set of chains wound around our most frightening code. The Wardens had written Hecate as a double saint and a devil, an AI that could think in war the way a river thinks in floods. We were allowed to use her only in defense. The Assembly had embedded that limit into law and power both, to wake Hecate. Offensive would be to break more than statutes. But if they shot first, if they put heat and force against us, then Hecate would wake for us, and we would suddenly be older than we looked. A museum can be a trap. That was the whole romantic idea. The plaques tell you what you think you see. The vents and hatches tell you what it can still do. We kept waiting. People sent us letters, bundles of text that the comms officer forwarded every midnight. Some were jokes, some were prayers. My favorite was a postcard from a school in Nairobi that said, "You are doing the bravest thing, which is nothing, and not blinking. We are also practicing not blinking." It made me cry in my narrow bunk, because I was tired, and because the fine-grained terror of waiting had been living at my collarbone. For so long it had its own hammock. On the second day, they moved. It was like a fingernail tapped against crystal. The Lexorian vertebrae brightened, a rhythm running down a ship's back from fore to aft. "Charging sequence," Netsanet said, and her voice had the measured cadence of a surgeon announcing. She was cutting the skin. "Carrier wave is odd. Not RM." Silvroth's final message arrived at that exact moment. "This demonstration will be precise. We will vent a small volume of your satellite population near the lunar south pole, ensuring no casualties." "Bull," Toru said. "And we will permit you hours to confirm our capacity and accept terms." They fired. We knew because the moon lifted its chin, just a breath. The southern sky filled with expanding glass, an umbrella of vaporized regolith, spreading thin as thought. The wave hit our instruments a minute later, the faintest squeeze. Like space had been convinced to shrug. It reached Earth's upper atmosphere and stroked it. The way wind smooths a cat the wrong way. 36 small satellites' trajectories corkscrewed out of their lanes and flashed to smoking dust. The lunar south polar workstations went dark. We waited for the casualty counts, the long roll of names like bones dropping. Then the word came, 12. It could have been 12,000. 12 was enough. Admiral Khatri's order arrived like a thunderclap in my implants. Hecate protocol is authorized. Defensive release. Say again. Defensive release. A second message followed, encrypted to my ribcage. It was 8 words. Hold. Let them step into our timing. The lock turned in my stomach. Warden node. I asked. Green, the comms officer said, already half standing. Her knuckles were white. All right, I said. Wake her. The ship's lights blinked once in a ripple that didn't come from power. It was an animal reaction, a shiver, the machine equivalent of adjusting a collar. New markers appeared on my display, spidered overlays of possibility, glowing in the dull frequencies that humans read as danger. Hecate's voice didn't speak. In my ear, she didn't speak to us at all. She spoke to machines. Hull plates flexed micrometers. My rails hummed a throat tone I'd never heard them sing. In the belly of Curitiba, the old flywheels began to spin. They'd been installed years ago as emergency kinetic reserves, a quaint notion in the era of blue-white drives and microfold pivots. Hecate asked them to become a different kind of organ, to drink momentum and hold it like a held breath. Tungsten. Rods are slotted, Toru reported. Negative, I said. Slot the seeds first. Seeds, I pointed. Hecate had drawn a map of pathways between the Lexorian vertebrae that labeled their carrier wave. In a geometry I couldn't name, not gravity, not the polite bend of a solar sail. Something else. The seeds would be rods too, but etched with lattice we stole from a particle lab on a cliffside in Chile, and pretended we'd lost. Launch windows in 7 minutes. Netsanet said, make it a waltz. I told her. We still did the human things. We called our families. We folded the long flags and stowed them on the Lexorian net. Silvroth began to repeat the word demonstration, perhaps to convince himself. He had made his first move. That was all I had ever wanted from him. All we had ever needed. The physics and the law aligned. When the clock hit 0. Curitiba pretended to be exactly what he thought she was. We fired our antique guns with an antique emotion. Anger rolled thin over fear. The rails puked tungsten. The coils screamed as the rods flickered into fractional plasma. The old Corvette galleon beside us stitched a line of green-white tracers across vacuum like a seamstress racing a sinking ship. Far below, over half the planet, people held themselves still in bedrooms and kitchens, suddenly as quiet as tombs. The Lexorians sneered in their careful way. Those vertebrae pulsed, a pale sleeve of force blurring to meet our shards. Their shields didn't shine. They made absence. Each of my rods winked out as if losing conviction. Impact, 0, Netsanit said, jaw locked. Good. I answered. Toru glanced at me. Good? Our rods aren't the point. Our seeds were. 3 of the tungsten slugs had been dust in the last 1,000 kilometers by design. A bloom of filament and lattice that Hecate had calculated would resonate with the not-quite-impress of the Lexorian wall. You don't punch a waterfall, you salt it. Resonance rising, Netsanit whispered. Oh, there you are. The Lexorian carrier wave rippled, just a little. Their clean sleeve showed a brace of tiny freckles, perturbations too small to matter in a lab, big enough to matter when you were absorbing real anger at interplanetary distances. Hecate took the freckles like handles and began to pull not on the Lexorians, not yet, but on us. The wave hit Curitiba, and the old flywheels drank it. The shield became, in our body, a wind. And we were a windmill, momentum harvesting. Toru realized, grinning like he was 20, we're stealing their push. Borrowing, I corrected. We'll give it back. We had waited to be hit, because only then did their waveform exist in our instruments as a thing with edges. Hecate could grip it, and she could teach our museums to dance with it. Curitiba rolled. The flywheels whined. The rails whispered readiness. Across the heritage line, old ships shook their paint and found their cores. Second volley, I said. Seeds again. The waltz becomes a reel when the floor starts to bend. We fired not to kill. Not yet, but to season their field with the one thing they hated, unpredictability. The Lexorians realized they were not alone in the room about 10 seconds too late. Their second shot was wider, the vertebrae glowing in a different rhythm. They were sweeping, trying to shove us from orbits entirely, to herd us into lanes where their demonstration could be more elegant. The sweep hit the seeds, and Hecate mapped the way their handle rippled back down the spine. She made a sound in the wiring that I felt in my teeth. Then she did something I had not been told she could do. She made patience into thrust. The flywheels bled their drink into the rails in an odd cadence. We weren't firing a projectile. We were firing backwards. The rails spat nothing visible, and Curitiba slid, elegant as a dancer, across a mathematics we didn't own. The momentum Hecate had banked gave us a new meaning of engine. We started moving sideways relative to their press, like a boat that should have capsized learning to tack. The heritage line followed us. Old plates sang. Guns that had last, fired in training exercises before I was born, learned a new song. We arsed, vectoring. Netsanit said, we can ride their push like a hill. Do it, I said. Draw them toward the quiet ring. The quiet ring was another museum piece the Lexorians hadn't flagged, because it looked like junk, a necklace of derelict satellites, and failed experiments circling Earth at a wrong inclination, the graveyard where people sent their regrets. It was more than regret. Engineers had been smuggling hardware into the ring for a decade. Microfold microfoils, collapsed microcavities that could be coerced to pinch space like a sullen ant pinching cheeks. They were illegal as metaphors. They were legal today. Lexorian. Formation shifting, Toru said. They don't like where this is going. Good, I repeated. Let's keep insulting their taste. We skimmed the edge of their field and skated like kids on a frozen lake. We'd been warned not to touch. The old battleship Sudbury lumbered and then surged, her hull quivering like she had a fever. I could hear her captain on the net laughing and swearing in equal measures. I'm 60 years retired, she bellowed, and you just made me a ballerina. The Lexorians weren't slow. Their field adjusted. Learning the wrong lesson, they narrowed their push to a spear, tried to take us one by one. That's when Hecate played the part of our waiting I hadn't liked. She offered them a throat. Decoy corridor open, Netsanit said. We looked fragile there. We did. The museum ships lined a channel that had gaps, unprotected angles, a hole where a Lexorian spear could fit. It wasn't a lie. We were fragile. But fragility is a weapon if you make it look like invitation. Admiral, I asked, permission to light the ring. Granted, Khatri said. But slow. We must not fold space through any human habitat. Understood? We didn't. Not really. We did the best our fear and our math could do. The Lexorian spear took the corridor with relief. I could feel it in my sternum. The simple, ruthless joy of someone who had wanted a straight fight all along and was finally going to have it. Silvroth said something on his pretty channel, outcomes, maybe, but this time there was a tightness in it. He had stopped talking to us and started talking to his own. He had been forced into narrative, and narrative is an earth thing. The spear shot down our throat. The quiet ring woke. Space is obliging until you push it. Then it. Sulks. We had built little sulks into the graveyard, areas of negative patience, regions that stored tension the way a glass holds a scream. The spear entered a corridor of such sulks and found its elegant field fouled. By 100 soft hands, it did not snap. That would have been simple. It smeared. Like butter dropped on a carpet. Now, I said that we gave back the push we had borrowed. The flywheels coughed their horde into the rails, and the rails exhaled it in packets that Hecate threw not at the Lexorians, but to the sides and behind, pushing against their press to change its shape. Our shot was not a weapon. It was a suggestion. The Lexorian field, now speared and smeared, tried to adjust. It had no practice at disorder. The seeds still resonating in its skin began to hum in disharmony. And that was the note Hecate needed. She took the wave, the push, the smearing, and she beat it like eggs until it thickened. Then she tilted the bowl. The spear slid, not into us, who were the point of this theater, but along the ring's sulking edge and into nothing we cared for. A pocket of space the size of a city block, empty of everything except old paint flecks and an experimental instrument someone once loved and had to abandon. The demonstration turned inward. The Lexorian field lanced itself on my display. One of their ships, a lovely pale spindle, shivered. Its vertebrae brightened hard, then stuttered. The wave collapsed. The ship didn't explode. It exhaled as if its lungs had been stolen. It drifted with the sadness of a balloon that had stopped believing. Don't kill them, I heard myself say, and realized I'd meant to, in some quiet corner I didn't like. Don't kill anyone, we don't have to. We can pinch the rest, Netsanet said. Push them into stable drift. Disablement only. Do it. The heritage line moved like scythes in wheat and like old women crossing streets. We were both. We used patience as leverage. Gave back what we took in a rhythm that made us engineers again instead of wolves. The Lexorians tried to flee, then to hold, then to talk. Only when Silvroth's voice slipped from flute to breath did I answer. Enough demonstration, I said, and let the planet hear me. Enough outcomes. Stand down, Silvroth. You will not fire on human habitats. We will not fire on your crew. You will match our patience, or you will become our lesson. He was silent for a long breath. Then, you waited to make us clumsy. We waited to make you visible, I replied. We can only fight what we can feel. You had to be struck first. Yes, he made a soft sound, pure astonishment. You made law into a weapon. It already was, I said. We built the scabbard to fit it. We took their surrender in pieces, not because we wanted to humiliate them, though I will confess I did, a little, with a human pettiness that feels like chewing ice. We did it in pieces because they were fearful things when their field went wrong. They had never been hit. They had only ever implied harm and been obeyed. There's a child in every empire that learns too late that the floor can be cold. The Lexorians docked a shuttle at Sao Luis Orbital, a station with tiles older than my mother. Silvroth came aboard Curitiba. He asked for it specifically, to see the antiques. He quipped hands stood on my bridge like a man visiting a church he didn't know how to disrespect. Anymore, you are very iron, he said, touching a weld line with long careful fingers. We are very tired, I said. You killed 12. We wish to kill none. Our demonstration ended, I said. I made myself keep my voice level. We will take your commander's apology in writing. We will take reparations. We will take your math on that carrier wave in exchange for ours on patience. We will not take any more flutes telling us our chairs creak. He smiled, finally, a small thing. I am sorry about the chairs. They creak. Well, Toru cleared his throat. Silvroth, he said, why mock us at all? Why come singing at a people you barely know? You could have asked to trade. Because trade is between equals, Silvroth said, as if quoting a proverb. We did not believe you equal. You do not look equal. He looked around at the steel, and the scuffed paint, and the hands with scars. I let him. There was pride in it. Like showing a friend the home you grew up in and letting him see the stains where you spilled soup and cried. You waited, he said eventually. Waiting is rare among those who can burn. We learned to wait, I said, from our grandparents, from our laws, from museums. He touched the rail, then the chair. This vessel is a museum. Was. I said, it will be again. We took them home, not all of them. Some left their spindles and rode our gentle tugs down to near-Earth orbits, where they sat in windows and watched a planet as if it might offend them by being green. Some stayed. Some we fed. Some we asked to help rebuild the southern lab on. The moon. I made sure the first bricks had 12 names written on them, in 12 handwriting styles, crooked and brave. Later, I learned Silvroth had written them on his copy too. That mattered to me in ways I'm still ashamed of and proud for. The planetary assembly convened at the old stadium in Odyssey, because it's good to make big choices in places where people once danced. Admiral Khatri spoke. She had a voice like dry riverbeds and clean boots. Defensive absolutism stands, she said. We will continue to wait when waiting is possible. We will continue to make waiting expensive for those who mistake it for weakness. Reporters asked me what we had done with Hecate, because that had leaked, of course, in the friendly human way that all secrets become gossip, and all gossip becomes law. I said, we asked her to make our patients legible, and that was the truest sentence I could stand to tell in public. Hecate went back into her lock. The wardens threw a party in a basement and cried harder than I had ever seen anyone cry. I stayed in orbit and walked Curitiba's decks with Toru, who had stopped bouncing long ago. We found a spot under a small porthole where school children had once pinned postcards. When Curitiba docked at coastal cities, the cards were still there, their paper yellowed, corners feathered. We added the Nairobi one. We taped it with extra care. Later, when the new museum registry was written, Curitiba was number 1, and the plaque said a stupid thing like first in defensive patience. That isn't what I think she was. A good museum isn't where you put the past. It's where you go to train for a kind of future you can only meet with your hands. Months after, Silvroth sent me a package by courier. Inside was a vertebra from a ruined Lexorian ship, polished to a glow. On it, in his handwriting that had learned to make a capital C with effort, he'd etched, outcome, waiting together. I put the bone in the wardroom and let the crew argue whether it was tacky. It was. It was beautiful too, a thing from someone who had backed down without learning to hate us for making him dot at night. I sometimes still hear the rail's low hum in my dreams. Not the roaring combat note, but the almost musical purr they make when you spin them without feeding them anything to throw. It's a lullaby that says, hold what you're given, keep it steady. Wait for the moment the river leans your way. We turned the museum lights back on. We let the children walk past the guns and touch the cold rails and ask, why does it creak? We told them, because it is old and honest, and we asked it to do one more thing. Then we took them to the porthole and showed them the postcard from Nairobi and the way Earth looks. When you have waited so long, the blue is a reward you can taste. They asked about the aliens, whether they would come back. I told them what I believed. If they do, I said, we will wait. We will make waiting the fastest thing in the system. We will be very, very quaint until we aren't. A little boy said, what if they don't shoot first next time? Then they don't get to meet us, I said. And Toru laughed, and Netsanet rolled her eyes. And Admiral Khatri, who had come up quietly, like Dawn said, they will shoot first or they will sit down. Those are the rules now. We kept the quiet ring running, but gentler. We cleared more space around the inhabited lanes. We sent the Lexorians back half of what we learned about their carrier wave, and they sent us half of what they learned about patience. I don't know if they can apply it. Waiting is hard when you're used to singing and being obeyed. It's harder still to wait as long as we did without becoming the kind of people who enjoy the idea of restraint more than its cost. I sometimes take an unscheduled shuttle down to the moon. There's a place where the glass umbrella of their first shot glittered microscopic beads into the dust. At noon, the sun makes them sing the faintest roar, nothing you'd notice if you weren't looking for it. I stand there with a hand over my ribcage, and I thank 12 names. I apologize too, because apologies are part of museums. They remind US that the plaques are incomplete, and the stories are stitched by hands that shake. When I come back up, Curitiba creaks just enough when I sit. It's the sound of a chair remembering you. It's the oldest sound. It's victory taught to be humble. And if, one day, we must do it again if someone laughs at our paint and our wrong angles and our riverboat names, I hope we remember that patience is not in the hull. It's in the hands on the hull, waiting, ready to make outcomes wait for us.